Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Occupy Fantasy Underdog Fantasy Best Ball Mania show. Chuck and Chris here are your hosts. We're going to be going through a Best Ball Mania draft today, talking about the Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison news. Chris, how we doing?
Chuck, always a pleasure to share the screen with you and one of our shows. You've been a busy man this week doing some NBA Finals live shows with Brian as well. So, certainly getting good usage out of your very sharp brain this week. I guess, yeah, let's lead off the show with that question. What do you think about the Dalvin Cook fallout here? Should we be reaching a little earlier for Madison ahead of his ADP, or what's the play here?
So, when we first started the show, we took Madison pretty frequently on here. I had, like, for a bit, I had way too much Madison in my exposures, and he was going around pick 100. He settled around pick 80 with the news. Like, we knew Dalvin Cook was going to be gone, so I don't think he should rise too much. He's going to because people got that confirmation. I saw a picture earlier. He went before Travis Etienne in one draft. He went like number 34 in another draft, and so people are going to be jumping on Madison. But I don't think his ADP should jump by more than a round or two. So if he falls to like the late 70s, 80s, I'm still going to take him a little bit. But other than that, I'm not really interested in reaching for him too much.
As of this morning, I pulled a hard copy of ADP out of Underdog, basically right after the news was announced. Alexander Madison's ADP was 76.5. Dalvin Cook's was 76.6. So Madison has officially risen above Dalvin Cook. There are interesting rumors about which teams Dalvin Cook may land with. I think the most common ones that have been floated by mainstream reporters are the Miami Dolphins, which would be really interesting, and the Denver Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of those teams, Chuck, have a running back that has been drafted in like the top 100, well, top 90 picks. Javonte goes about 91. Pretty much all springs. So those are two landing spots that will be kind of interesting because I don't think it really displaces the board too much if Cook goes there. But obviously, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, Miami for me would be a disaster because I have a lot of the Miami running backs, Mostert and Jeff Wilson, and then Denver. Denver would not be a bad spot for him. Samaje Perine's value would probably disappear, but we'll see what they end up doing. So let's go ahead and jump into a Best Ball Mania draft. One thing though, I wanted to mention, it's interesting. The puppy's only 50% full. We saw the first puppy fill really fast, and this one's twice as big. So it looks like this one's going to probably have another couple weeks if you want to get some puppy drafts in. I think they're great practice, and either way, 5 puppy drafts versus 1 Best Ball Mania draft. To me, I'll take the 5 drafts most of the time.
100%, Chuck. Yeah, let's. There's a lot of room left here in Best Ball Mania 4. That Underdog's done a great job of mapping out the demand for these contests. This contest should be open right up until just before week 1 kicks off. So there is plenty of time to enter this contest, just to dovetail with what you were talking about. If you're new to drafting Underdog this year, definitely start with some of those puppy drafts here in Puppy 2, and then Puppy 3, 4, 5, et cetera, when those open up.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and enter now if anyone's watching and wants to draft along with us. So it looks like we need 7 more people. I think Chris is going to jump in this one too. So we'll have 2 of us in here. Hopefully one of us doesn't reach on Alexander Madison, but we'll see what happens.
ADP movers in the last few days, Chuck, since I think it's been about a week since you and I at least did a show together. Rondale Moore, and this is using the ADP tracker on Occupy Fantasy. Rondale Moore up 19.2 spots, was going around pick 160 last week at this time, right around the time of obviously the DeAndre Hopkins news really taking shape in the best ball lobbies. Now he's going 141, round 12. Obviously, the second half of the draft, there's a lot of room for players to move around, but that was kind of interesting to me to see secondary Arizona wide receiver being the biggest mover over the last few days. We also have Tyquan Thornton from the New England Patriots is right behind him with a move up 16.6 spots. Jerome Ford still climbing the draft boards, Cleveland running back 2. Jaylen Warren right behind him with the Pittsburgh Steelers as their RB2. Chuck, just speaking of those 2 guys, Ford and Warren, I know we haven't linked these free agent running backs specifically to the Browns or the Steelers, but I feel like these are the most fragile type of players to be investing in as risers right now, right? Because we have all of these high upside free agent running backs that could land with one of those teams and just completely blow up that spot altogether. Just something to keep in mind, I think.
Well, the thing too about these guys specifically is all their value is currently based on speculation. There's
Right.
nothing in the numbers that say these guys like should be drafted where they are. It's just Jerome Ford. Nick Chubb is the only running back in Cleveland. If something happens to him, or even if Jerome Ford maybe gets some backup touches, then maybe he has some standalone value. But Jalen Warren too. Are they going to reduce Najee's workload? I don't know. Najee seemed like he was pretty good after he stopped dealing with that foot injury.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm drafting Jalen Warren a bit. He's a decent zero RB target, and then kind of same with Jerome Ford. But I don't think these are guys you want to draft to depend on to contribute points to your team. These are kind of just these should be your maybe fifth, maybe fourth, I guess, if you have three strong running backs, but your fourth or fifth running backs on your roster. That's just kind of like, okay, hopefully these guys contribute something towards the end of the season.
Yeah, those guys are in that. I mean, I refer to them frequently as that lottery ticket tier of
Mm-hmm.
running back that you can take in the second half of contests. Chuck, it looks like you have the seventh overall pick in our draft here. I drew the 10th pick. So
Yeah.
we should get a couple of different roster constructions we can talk through together on the show here. Should be interesting. Not a ton of badges in the lobby here, so this might be an interesting one.
This could be a fun one. Let's see where Madison goes, and that's what'll tell us if this is a good draft room for us or not.
Mm-hmm.
So if you, just in case, what I have on here is my spike week overlay. So these teams right here next to the players, this is the week 15, 16, and 17 matchup. And then this number right here is the ADP change in the last 7 days. So it's kind of nice to have it just right in front of us. And we can maybe find some points to talk about throughout the show. And we see some guys like the first rounders obviously aren't going to change much, 0, 1, 0, 1. So we'll see
Mm-hmm.
in the later round guys who's really moving.
And we've seen a little bit of a drop here with Christian McCaffrey. I was talking about this in Discord earlier this morning.
Mm-hmm.
His ADP is pretty close to falling below Cup and Hill, and now still on the board almost to you at 7. That is kind of an interesting change in the landscape over the last few days.
I really hate this when like McCaffrey. I would take him at 6 every time here, and this guy should take. All right, well, I mean, I haven't gotten CMC at 7, I think, ever in my life, so we're gonna go ahead and take CMC right now. What I was about to say was like the guy at 6 is getting CMC, and I'm at 7. I would have taken Stephon Diggs, and like I'm still fine to take Stephon Diggs, but it feels like the guy getting CMC a couple picks late is just it's so much value and thinking about the combinations of players at 18 versus who's there at 21, 22. It's just this was awesome. Good start to the draft.
So I'm not likely to get the player I want here. I'm going to adopt Brian's strategy of not saying their name. And there's another player that goes pretty close to the top of the board here that, in truth, I haven't really selected at all. And that's the one that came off the board. Austin Eckler is a player I'm having a hard time
Mm-hmm.
rationalizing. The math makes sense there,
Mm-hmm.
but I just feel like there's a lot that could go wrong, especially with the early off-season rumors of them potentially being interested in moving on from him. I think this is a good spot to take Bijan. So that's who I'm going to take here to start my team here in this particular contest.
I like it. I was taking Bijan a bit, but now I'm mostly so I drafted him a little bit too much, I think, because I had none, and so I'm like, all right, well, let's get some Bijan, and then now I'm pretty much taking most of the receivers around there. But yeah, Eckler is pretty much the only guy I'm avoiding at the end of the first round, and I'm not sure why. Like you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but it's just tough to click on him when these other receivers are right there.
It feels like he's very similar in results, projection, play style to some of those guys going just around later here. Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson, Brees Hall, and I'm much more interested in those guys at their current cost, I guess is probably the best way for me to describe my feelings there. We'll see. That's kind of the way these things go. I think Brian and Moose talked about forcing specific builds on the last show that we did on the channel. They were angling for a Browns Jets stack in that particular show, but I think that's kind of what I'm going to have to do in the future with Austin Eckler, Chuck, is maybe force
Mm-hmm.
myself to build some teams with him just to see what they look like.
Yeah, so that whole offense, the Chargers, I'm not getting to him that much. Like Keenan Allen's a tough click. Mike Williams is a tough click. The like Keenan Allen, he's getting older, but he was still great last year. And then Mike Williams, the injury worries. And then yeah, Austin Eckler, I'm not clicking, so I'm not taking Justin Herbert. I did take him once actually in a draft last week for the first time, so that was different.
Really don't love this spot. Be interesting to see what. Okay, so I was kind of thinking about Garrett Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Bijan Robinson correlations, we got the Carolina Panthers week 15, Colts week 16, and the Bears in week 17. So there's really nothing right here for me to consider.
Not interested in Jonathan Taylor.
No, I'm really not, because I'm terrified about what I get at wide receiver if I don't take one here. So I am going to go with my favorite one in this range, and it is Chris Olave
Nice.
over Jalen Waddle. I think is a clear wide receiver one in his own offense. This is ugly, Chuck. I do not like the Bijan Robinson, Chris Olave start, but a little bit of NFC South correlation there to begin the draft for me.
Yeah, I think earlier in the draft season, I was talking about I really like these late round picks, but that is not the case anymore. It's really tough. I've been getting a lot of 1 and 2s, and so the 1 and 2 is just the teams feel so much better. Like I still like the CD Amon Ra combo, but yeah, it's a little bit tough to find that correlation right there. And so I'm not taking Jonathan Taylor. I'll take Chubb before I take Taylor. But like you said, now I'm going to start the draft with 2 receivers, so that or 2 running backs. So that's a problem with taking CMC first, even though I got great value on him. I'm not going to pass up
Mm-hmm.
on him. Like I'm not really interested in reaching for Devontae or T Higgins. So it's kind
Yeah,
of
when we pick in the early part of the first round, that's where I love taking T Higgins, especially. I did. I, I don't love even Devonta Smith though is tough because I feel like you still want to try to pair those guys with their quarterbacks if you can, and so Smith is in this weird spot where you almost aren't ever in a good spot on the draft board to get both Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts together, right? I mean, that's a tough. I think it would be a unique roster if you can pull it off. It just the cost of the players right now makes it very difficult.
Yeah, there's something to say about that. Like, it's really easy to get the combos with the Cincinnati guys and Joe Burrow. Like, you can get Pat Mahomes with whatever other receivers, even Josh Allen. You can pair with Steph Diggs if you reach for him. But
Mm.
like Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts, if I have an opportunity to take them together, I'm going to do it every time because it's not something that's going to come up in most drafts. I've seen the one spot take Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts a lot when they fall, and I think that's a pretty good combo there, 23, 26, something like that.
That's probably the best spot on the board to get it. A little riskier at like the 2 hole, but it might be there as well. But obviously, Hurts going at pick 24. The ADP is just really tight there to pull off that stack. So a little bit of a running back train here started with Taylor, Pollard, Henry, obviously T. Higgins sandwiched in the middle there. Yeah, well, you and I needing receivers at this point, I think we're okay with that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the good plan would be to just hit 4 receivers in a row right now. 4 receivers in a row, then Darren Waller, and then a couple more running backs and my quarterback. This could end up being an okay draft. One thing with the Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith, I've seen them go 12 and 13 sometimes, and I get you want to get your combo, you want to get your guys, but my problem with that is there's people who have Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith, and they also have Justin Jefferson on their team. And so it's kind of like whoever you end up getting at number 36, like that player is going to be competing against Justin Jefferson on those other Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith rosters. And so that kind of goes
Mm-hmm.
along with like our thing about reaching for guys earlier, where it's just other players are going to get better value.
Yeah,
We're taking DK.
okay. And I like that here quite a bit. Geno Smith's ADP has flipped with Aaron Rodgers, which is a wild sentence in general, knowing the history of those two players. But that is kind of interesting to me to see that Smith is now climbing draft boards. But I think it's because people probably see the value now in pairing with a top wideout like DK Metcalf here in the third round. I think his ADP is pretty reasonable and definitely a wide receiver that you want to target in a roster that you're building the way that you are right now, Chuck.
Yeah, I might have talked about before that I'm not super excited about drafting DK Metcalf at ADP, but with my specific start, DK would be my absolute number one choice at this spot. If Debo was here, I don't think I've drafted Debo at all yet, but I mean Calvin Ridley is still a question mark. I think his ADP even it's up 2 spots, which what he caught a pass in practice or something. So I don't know what to do with that.
So this player you had mentioned on one of our shows, he was your auto pick in this range, and he has somewhat turned into that for me as well. It's Amari Cooper with the Cleveland Browns. I'm buying a little bit into the dog pound hype this off season. Hopefully, a full season preparing to start in week 1 for Deshaun Watson. There changes the efficiency here, and we can hopefully just chalk up those last 5 games of 2022 to just some some bad variance, him being rusty. That's if you're taking Cooper, I think you're angling to either stack the Jet side and have him as your bring back or stack with Watson. So, and with Cooper as my second wide receiver drafted here, I think that obviously is firmly putting Watson in play for me on this team.
Yeah, that's one thing. So I've been drafting Amari Cooper a ton, but then I looked and I really don't have that much Deshaun Watson. Not sure why. Like maybe I'm just taking someone else in the range. He's going in the early 80s versus a few of the other quarterbacks I like in the early 100 range. But I do want to get more Deshaun Watson. And then I'm not sure what other pieces of that offense I want. Pass catchers, anyway.
I've got some correlation on my current team here with Justin Fields if I want it, just because I have Bijan. So I don't have to take Deshaun Watson. Fields is tough. He's not someone that I'm in love with stacking with, just because I think the most obvious choice is DJ Moore. And as we've talked about several times, I feel like he's a little overpriced. Mm-hmm. But if I do take Fields here, the issue is what I'm passing up at the other position. So I actually don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to go a different direction here and take Drake London for some correlation in week 17. Build around the Falcons offense a little bit more here. Obviously leaving the window open for me to take Desmond Ridder late. Drake London, not a player I have taken a lot of, so just trying to do something a little different.
I've done that a couple times with my Bijan drafts, taking Drake London or Kyle Pitts to get that double correlation. And then I think I did sneak in Justin Fields to a couple of those too. Just I can't imagine that's a very popular Week 17 stack, but I think it maybe should be. These are going to be two offenses that probably put up points. So I don't know, it might be going a little bit overlooked. Well, I have not been taking too much Lamar, but this far past ADP, he has some correlation with Christian McCaffrey in week 16. And I'm not really going to click any of these guys over Lamar, so I'm going to go ahead and take him here.
I like it, and still plenty of opportunity. Obviously missing out on Andrews with, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Odell Beckham to get a little bit of a pairing there if you want it. So don't mind that at all at this spot in drafts.
I want to look at this number 9 slots team, Mr. McBean over here. He had the opportunity to pair up Mark Andrews with Lamar Jackson, and he passed it up to take DeAndre Hopkins. To me, this is a really hard pairing to get, Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson, if you're not reaching for it, like to get it naturally. And so that's one pairing I would have taken Lamar Jackson 100% with this pick here to pair with Mark Andrews, especially you have Jalen Waddle already. Oh, it would have been a pretty good looking team.
We can chalk that up to a missed opportunity. So you and I will look back at this draft pod in about 5 months and see that he probably won the pod. Right? That's just how it goes. Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin's ADP, I think, is still too low, even here in round 4. I've got him as a top 8 wide receiver in my own rankings, but I obviously love the pick. If I was in this section of the draft board, that's probably what I would have done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Terry's usually my click over all of these guys. Like I'm mixing in DJ Moore and getting a little more Christian Kirk, I guess. But Chris in the comments said 2 RB start, got to go 5 receivers in the next 7 rounds. Well, I already messed that up. I said I was going to do it too, and then I took Lamar because he was there. But it's okay. We'll try and make it up with volume a little bit, and then we're probably not going to take a third running back for a while anyway. Yeah,
this is a roster construction where you're probably looking at 8 plus receivers, depending on how it falls to you, because you're going to probably be relying on some more spike weeks from those lower ranked players to fill the 3 wide receivers in the flex spot. So I think it's okay to take Jackson there as long as you build the rest of the draft that way.
So one thing I mentioned, I really like taking Darren Waller around ADP, and pick 79 is a great spot for it if he's available. It's kind of weird taking the elite quarterback and the elite tight end after I already used my first 2-round picks on running backs. So I'm going to be weaker at wide receiver if that's what I'm planning on doing, but I'll see what players are available. If there's not a receiver who I think is comparable to Darren Waller, then I'm just going to go ahead and try and take him at 79.
The number 1 pick owner here with the Jefferson TJ Hawkinson double stack. Very strong beginning to their draft for sure. The only thing I would have probably done different. Well, he didn't have a chance to take T. Higgins. T. Higgins came off the board. So let's see if they they grabbed their Cincinnati correlation late with Tyler Boyd or something like that. But that's a really interesting start for sure.
Grab Jackson Smith at the pick 49. Justin Fields
That's
went
a
50. Ooh.
little bit of a reach on JSN, I think, anyway. But we'll see how it goes.
On one of the other sites that's full PPR, Jackson Smith is going at pick 80. Kind of blows my mind. Like I lean towards him being a good value over there rather than him being overpriced here, but yeah, it's a little bit early.
And you would think in that scoring format that if you would rate JSN higher than you would in this format, right? So those are some pick values that are somewhat misaligned, I think. So if you're playing over on that other site, love JSN for sure in that range.
Right. Kenneth Walker's another guy dropping too. Like I have a little bit of interest now at this ADP. Not for this draft, but next time.
Yeah, I don't have really any Seattle correlation to think of on this roster. I do have some Tampa Bay correlations. So if you don't do it, Chris Godwin is something I'm thinking about. Just, I guess, to leak that a little bit. Brandon Ayuk being touted as the most talented player in San Francisco's camp. I think I just saw that come across my timeline, and I feel like you did as well because that is why you just added him to your roster.
Yeah, he's a player who I have come around on. I'm going to just take the spike week potential he gives us, and there's a little bit of correlation with CMC, so see if I can get some more of the playoff correlation with him, I guess. I would have taken Godwin if I wasn't taking Ayuk. It's interesting. The guy took Lockett at 54. I felt Lockett was a guy who's kind of falling, but guess not. I was hoping he was going to be there at 66. But
so I am going to take Chris Godwin here. Some week 17 correlation with my top wide receiver, Chris Olave. Feel pretty good about that. And I've got a couple of different opportunities now to get a week 17 quarterback. Don't throw up Baker Mayfield or Derek Carr.
I'm in on Baker.
Yeah, so I am as well, but those are they're definitely in that don't throw up tier of quarterbacks in these drafts. I'm not gonna beat around the bush there. It doesn't feel great selecting either one.
Well, just wait till DeAndre Hopkins signs with the Titans next week, and Ryan Tannehill shoots up to pick like 170 or so.
Will Tannehill shoot up, or will we start seeing people draft Will Levis? Right? I mean, Tennessee that's weird because I don't really ever see a Tennessee quarterback or at least I don't notice the Tennessee quarterback getting selected. Tannehill barely with an average draft position of 214.6 I think that's both of those things, Chuck. Tannehill is on a low pass volume offense, and it doesn't feel like they really even believe in him as their starter. I have to make a pick here, and I think I'm going to go with some more correlation with let's see here. I'm going to take Mike Evans, actually, and I think I am going to angle for this cheap Buccaneers stack. Feels a little gross, but that's the way the board is falling to me right now.
Man, well, I would have taken Mike Evans if he was there at my pick, but he won't be. And now I have a weird decision here if George Kittle's still on the board, 10 past ADP.
There goes Alexander Madison, 64th overall on this particular show. A little bit, about a round ahead of ADP. That's what we said we thought was going to happen with him in general. So,
yeah, it's not that bad, actually. Yeah. So I'm between Addison and Deontay Johnson. If there was no correlation, I would just take Addison. I'm super loaded up on Deontay. Don't have much Addison. I want more exposure to the Vikings offense, but Deontay Johnson has that correlation with DK Metcalf week 17. So unfortunately, we're just going to take Deontay again. But I do want to get more Jordan Addison. His price seems really expensive, but other than Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson, like Dalvin Cook's gone, someone's going to do something on this offense, right? Like I do think this ADP is too high, but I want to try and get exposure to him if I can.
Between Bijan Robinson, Chris Olave, Drake London, both of the Bucs wide receivers, and cameo from Amari Cooper, I'm just loading up on the NFC South, which is an interesting choice for sure. I would not advise this as a healthy decision in general for people. Okay. George Pickens comes off directly after Deontay Johnson. I still find this to be a really interesting pair of players in draft contests this year. To me, I think it's clear. It sounds like you're in the same boat. Johnson over Pickens. So are you going to find yourself talking yourself into taking Pickens a little bit more just to diversify, or are you pretty much just Deontay or bust here with that wide receiver room at the spot anyway.
Earlier in my draft process, I was Deontay or bust. I was not interested in Pickens at all, but now I'm getting more interested in him. I have a few percent. I probably have more than I would expect of Pickens, actually. Just there's so much good correlation with the players that I like early, mostly Seattle week 17, but I am getting to Pickens, and I don't mind Kenny Pickett. I think that's a pretty cheap stack. Either one of the Pittsburgh receivers with Kenny Pickett kind of late as your second quarterback.
I've seen Pickett fall as late as like the 18th round. I did take him as a third quarterback in a contest where I had two earlier quarterbacks with the same bye. Definitely like Pickett as one of the later quarterback flyers you can get on rosters. I think the pricing there's probably a little low. Pittsburgh should be a little better this year.
Yeah.
Okay, one comes off. Okay. This is really a tough range, I would say. And I think this is why there's a lot of value in slamming wide receiver early, because once you get past Kadarius Toney, he's sort of my flag player in this round. Gabe Davis right after that. Like, there's just a tremendous amount of uncertainty, I think, here at wide receiver.
Well, are you in on any of these running backs on the board right now? Because I'm interested in DeAndre Swift. That's pretty much it.
I think I like Cam Akers. I think the usage was really strong in December last year. And if this offense is more efficient with Stafford and Kupp, and Akers still retains the same workload he had in the past, then I think he's a clear good pick here. Pacheco, I'll take it for some correlation with Chiefs Bengals, but I don't love it. This is a tough range for running back, Chuck. There's no way around that.
Yeah, Cam Akers is the only guy that I'm really clicking on here. Someone on Twitter is kind of talking me into Rachaad White, but still having a tough time getting there. And then Dalvin Cook, I'm interested to see how far he falls. If he starts falling to like pick 100, I'll probably start scooping him up a little bit. Just hope he signs somewhere good. But I don't even know what a good landing spot is for him because he's just going to nuke whatever running back room he joins. So
when Dameon Pierce starts to slip like this as he comes off the board, I'll consider it, but just given that we don't expect Houston to be a tremendously good team this year, I'm just not super interested in a running back that doesn't have much of a passing game role this early in the draft. So that's the other running back that goes around here that's kind of tough for me to click on as well. All right, so there goes Mr. Pitts.
Double elite tight end.
Now, I only have one running back on my roster, so I am obviously thinking about this range pretty heavily as the free agent comes off the board. But yeah, just not loving what's on the board here, so I may pass on it in this spot and just hope something a little later comes back around to me.
Pick 79. Pretty much have to take a receiver right now. I'm next at pick 90. I hate reaching for guys like this, but I want to make sure that I get him. I guess I could wait for... Is Bateman already gone? Someone already took her shot. Oh, he went right before this. All right, so I'm just going to take Zay Flowers, lock up my Lamar Jackson stack. Rashad Bateman went 78. So
a little surprising to see, definitely. And there goes Quentin Johnston.
It's like I could wait on Zay Flowers and hope he's there at 90, but I don't like any of these receivers here. I would have ended up taking DeAndre Swift or Cam Akers, and if Zay Flowers is gone, it's kind of a disaster. So I needed to get my fourth wide receiver here.
So I could take Deshaun Watson for the correlation with Amari Cooper here, but I'm feeling like things are a little light at the running back position for me, and I'm already angling towards some of these NFC South teams for stacks, and one player that correlates pretty well with my roster is Cam Akers at running back with a Week 16 game coming up against the Chris Olave's New Orleans Saints. So I'm going to put him in as my RB2 here.
I like it. Yeah, it was like Chris said in the chat, Underdog is such a wide receiver avalanche, as the field is a little bit sharper than the other sites. And yeah, it's true. I mean, the receivers go early, and just look at all these running backs at the top of the board no one wants.
Underdog does a fantastic job with these contests. I think obviously the user experience with both the website and the application obviously leads to more engagement, and then just the contests themselves. Look, obviously they're sponsoring the show here, so we are going to tout the product a little bit. But I love drafting on Underdog, Chuck. It's definitely a really fun experience.
Oh, it's like I know that my expected ROI is probably higher on the other sites, but yeah, the user experience is just so good on Underdog, and slow drafts are just. This is the only site I can do slow drafts on because it's the only site that gives me the information I need when I need it. You know, like if I'm on the clock, I need to know I'm on the clock.
So I feel somewhat rewarded for going with
Mm-hmm.
Cam Akers
Mm-hmm.
last round because I can still get my Amari Cooper stack with Deshaun Watson. And I think there are still a couple of opportunities for New York Jets bringbacks that I can use as well. So I'm feeling a little bit better about my team going with the high upside quarterback here.
I really like the build of your team so far. You want to trade?
Man, well, we'll see. The results will speak for themselves in a few months, Chuck. It's extremely likely. Most of the teams we look at the end of doing a draft and go, wow, I really like this team. They may end up being the worst ones we have. I always tell
Mm-hmm.
myself that. It's kind of like when I'm sure a lot of people who play these contests play in home leagues with friends or dynasty leagues, whatever. And sometimes you look at trades and go, why did they do this? This is completely lopsided. And you find out a few months later, they're either a lot more even than you thought they were going to be, or they
Mm-hmm.
end up being lopsided in the completely opposite direction. So you just truly never know how these things are going to turn out.
And it only takes a couple of late picks who overperform to turn, what looks like a bad team into a great team. So I'm going to take Dave Montgomery here. It's a guy I'm trying to get a little bit more of. Don't love any of the other options. Could have went with Evan Engram for that correlation, but probably just try to scoop Zay Jones or my boy Tank Bigsby to get that Jacksonville.
Bigsby probably fits firmly into that group we were talking about earlier with Jerome Ford
Mm-hmm.
and oh God, who was the other one? But these running backs that aren't being drafted for any math related reason, it's just kind of upside if there's a situation change we can't forecast. So I'd say Jacksonville, although it's not being rumored at this point, would be another team I'd be kind of leery of, like a Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette would be an interesting reunion. But one of these big free agents signing with the team and really blowing up the running back room.
Right. Rooney is killing this draft. He was his RB1. Yeah, Bijan Robinson, slam receivers, get a good RB2 under Deshaun Watson. Yeah, it's a pretty good start. This isn't you in the
So
comments talking, is it, Chris?
it really isn't. I completely appreciate the feedback, good or bad. Thank you very much in the comments section. Lazard, I would have obviously liked him to fall to me for a Jets bringback with my Brown stack that I'm building out, but I think you already know very well, since you've done so many shows with me, who I have my eyes set on as the bringback there. So I'm fine with
Mm-hmm.
Lazard not falling to me here.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like the number one pick owner, double quarterback slam, kind of interesting there, but paired Geno with JSN and then got JJ and Hawkinson with Kirk Cousins. So kind of an interesting build by that owner.
I don't hate this. It feels like this guy gave up some value to get that Seattle stack, but yeah, I don't hate it. I don't hate double tapping the quarterback there.
Couple of picks away, Chuck. Are we thinking about going with like a 3 tight end team here? Because obviously you don't have one yet. I kind of am in the same boat. What do you think?
I feel like I'm probably going to end up with 3 tight ends. Yeah, I'll consider Evan Engram if he falls right here. Juju, I'm kind of embarrassed about this, but Juju is my highest exposed player in my drafts right now on Underdog, and I don't love it. So I'm trying to avoid drafting him if I can, but it's like in this range, I think he's a fine pick. Like he's a receiver who hopefully can be the number one option, I guess number one uh, after Ramondre, but I think he's a great value.
This Patriots offense should be forced to pass the football more in some high scoring games against some elite offenses in the Bills and the Dolphins and what everyone hopes the Jets turn into with Aaron Rodgers under center. So you and I think, are in the same mindset there with these Patriots wide receivers led by Juju. I think there's a lot more upside than the price currently suggests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like, because it's like if I pass up on Juju, my fifth receiver, hopefully I can get Tyler Boyd, or it's going to be one of these guys. But I hate taking Evan Engram here, but 10 picks past ADP, he has a correlation with my quarterback. I'm just going to go for it.
All right. A little bit of a tight end run,
This Juju goes right
potentially,
after. Mm-hmm.
but you knew he was a good pick in this range. So congratulations to Coke and Dope on both an interesting username and the selection. I do have a player I want to take here that correlates with my stack. I hope he makes it to me. McBean does not have, or McBean has a tight end already, so he
Mm-hmm.
should not be interested in this player as the time finally runs out. He takes Dak Prescott, so I can double stack Deshaun Watson with his tight end, David Njoku.
Love it. Love it. Brian in the chat. I am killing this draft, quote unquote. Michael Jester joining late. Have we talked about Madison and where we think his ADP will go? Yeah, we've touched on him a bit. He went, what did he go, 64? Yeah, he
Mm-hmm.
went
Yeah,
64 in this
64th today.
draft. His ADP, it's what, late 70s right now. So I think he'll probably end up maybe a little bit higher than this. But if he goes higher than this, I think it's bad. But yeah, I think like late fifth, early sixth seems like a good settling spot for him. He's going to jump higher. So we've seen a couple times he might like end up maybe as high as like 50 or even higher. But then I think that he'll fall from that peak, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
People just excited to draft like the new info and best ball, and so he's going to be a little bit overvalued for the next couple of weeks, at least. What do we feel about the approach being touted of our last six picks being quarterbacks and tight ends, since tight end really doesn't matter outside of the top guys, and then we don't miss on the receivers and running backs? So it's something like just the tight ends at the end project better than the receivers and the running backs at the end. And so I love just taking three or four tight ends at the end. Like if I have Evan Engram, I'm still going to take two tight ends. Like with this build, I'm probably going to take two tight ends in the very last round of the draft. With quarterback, I don't want to punt quarterback as much. It's just with three tight ends, hopefully one of them can catch a touchdown most weeks, or four tight ends. But with three quarterbacks, like is one of them going to be capable of putting up 25 fantasy points per week, to try to match these elite guys? And at the bottom, the answer is probably not. So I'm comfortable taking late tight end, but quarterback, I really want someone at least, like at worst, in the Tua Daniel Jones range as my
Mm-hmm.
QB1. As we saw Chris take his guy AJ Dillon. It's a great pick. Hopefully there's a receiver left for me. I'm not touching OBJ. Man, that's the thing about passing up on receivers. Like I have to reach on a receiver if I want to get one. Now I only have four. My receiving room is very weak. Like best player available is one of these running backs probably.
And this is a running back, tight end, quarterback heavy range of ADP. We really only see Odell and Sky Moore in the immediate next like 10 picks if you just sort by regular ADP here on the site. So that it kind of reinforces that you really should be taking the wide receivers earlier if you can.
Yeah, I took Devin a chain, whatever. Little correlation with my quarterback at that Miami for week 17, but I don't love it. Like I should be taking a receiver right now, but like I still think this guy is worth more to my team than Sky Moore, Darnell Mooney, OBJ right
Mm-hmm.
now. Like Sky Moore could do something, but I think that these are kind of dead picks.
Yeah, it's all upside now with some of these receivers. More importantly, I think you kind of think through your stacks at this point with wide receiver because you're looking at a lot of wide receiver twos, slot wide receivers that are left, and you probably need to think about your roster combination as you march through the contest and hopefully into the playoff rounds. Those stacks and having some of those more unique players sneak through on your roster that could make the difference for these big prize pools.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like Michael Gallup, right?
Yeah.
Probably a lot more valuable on a Dallas roster with Dak Prescott and another Dallas teammate, just because if Gallup sneaks through, I don't know how many rosters are going to already be built that way that have him, right? So that's kind of how I'm thinking about approaching this range in general at wide receiver.
No, I like that. Yeah, I think that's what everyone should be doing. But they aren't. So I might be done at running back. I have four good running backs. Like I have CMC and Chubb, and then I have David Montgomery, who I really like having a third running back who I expect to contribute points every week. And then the rookie. This is probably a overpay, but yeah, I might be done at running back and just take 9 receivers in this draft.
I don't mind that given the state of your roster and at the top. I mean, if anything happens to either of those guys, you're not going to be doing well this season with this team anyway. So that's
Yeah,
probably the correct way to think about it.
that's the thing. Like if CMC gets hurt, he was my first round pick. I'm probably not competing. I'm just not going to be competing anymore. Like I did have some drafts where my first round pick or early picks, whatever, get hurt. I might be thinking of like NBA where my first pick got hurt, but like you can still sneak those teams through. Like you have to draft the rest of the team very strong. The advantage is if CMC's out for the season and comes back for the playoff weeks and then contributes and no one has him, but it seems pretty unlikely.
Yeah, no, I mean, I only drafted a handful of teams in the Dinger, which was the big MLB season contest here on Underdog. And in the first round, first round or early second round, I was taking a ton of Jacob DeGrom. He went out for the season basically with an arm injury that blew up my team. So that's just something to be aware of. I think a lot of content creators talking about that. Just embrace the way that you've built your roster when you're in the middle of these drafts. Assume it's going to be correct, because if it's not, you're probably screwed anyway.
Mm-hmm. So I still don't like OBJ. Like, is 14 picks enough value to draft OBJ here? I don't think so. Took Michael Gallup. You just mentioned him. I have the week 16, 17 correlation with him. So hopefully he's the guy you need.
Nico Collins comes off. That is quite the selection here. He certainly has. And now this is probably a weird selection to make in this range, but I think the player I like best here correlates with the Cleveland Browns, who I'm now heavily invested in. They have a week 16 matchup with the Houston Texans. And I've got Dalton Schultz queued up. I've got kind of a weird build here with 2 mid-round tight ends in Njoku and Schultz, but I think I'm now done taking tight ends doing that, Chuck. I feel pretty good about that.
I love that. Are you pretty high on Dalton Schultz overall?
I think he's got top 10 tight end upside. I don't think that's saying a tremendous amount at that position, because everything after basically Darren Waller's ADP is probably a crapshoot. But once those guys are off the board, these 2 guys I've selected, Njoku and Dalton Schultz, I think they have some of the most upside left. Chig would be another one. The Bears situation, the Bills situation, I'm a little uncertain on. And then the Rams we've talked about in prior shows. I really do like Tyler Higbee as well. He's the other tight end in this range I'm pretty high on.
Love all those guys, yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Dalton Schultz finished top 5 this year.
Okay, back to me. And Jaylen Warren was definitely something I was thinking about. So now I can no longer do that. 1352 is what I have here. Pick 135. And I do think this is an okay range to start considering reaching a little bit. I am going to go with the trend here just because I do fall into the groupthink trap sometimes, and I'll take a share of Rondale Moore. I have not drafted him yet this year, but obviously with Hopkins out of the picture, there's some upside here.
He still feels like a value at this ADP. Not too much of a value, but I'm very happy to draft him at that pick. Arizona. Man, this is pretty gross at receiver.
Which, I just speaking to the question earlier, I understand the thought process behind slamming some quarterbacks and tight ends late, but I still think there's a lot of upside here at wide receiver and a couple of running backs that are interesting if they end up getting the right breaks throughout the season. We've already talked about Tank Bigsby, Chuck, but I like Rashawn Johnson a lot. I think he has a good chance to win that running back competition in Chicago. Was a backup to my guy here, Bijan Robinson at Texas in college. Really the only reason he didn't have the volume in college. I'm not interested in him today, but got to be interested in Tyler Algier if anything happens to Bijan Robinson. And then a lot of upside only plays at wide receiver left, I think, at this point.
I mean, Adam Thielen is upside only, right? That's why I
Yeah,
drafted him. He can't be worse than 0.
kind of a cheap stack option anyway with the Panthers because none of those guys go super high. Bryce Young's still available, for example, if you need the quarterback. So I do get it. I'm having a hard time selecting Panthers wide receivers other than DJ Chark, who I've talked about at length on these shows being my favorite one for this season.
So I've pretty much stopped taking DJ Shark at ADP because I have another player I have way too much of. Even though he's a late round pick, you should be overexposed to your late round guys. I needed to stop taking him. So like
Mhm.
I see him fall to 170, I think the other day, and I have to take him at 170 if I need a receiver. But just being careful with my exposures. It's interesting to see Tank Bigsby above Raheem Mostert on ADP now.
By a healthy amount, too, like 8 picks is what it looks like right now. So uh, the addition of a chain there in Miami is probably hurting Mostert and Wilson. And
Mm-hmm.
now, obviously, it's going to be out of control with these Dalvin Cook rumors until we get some finality to that saga.
Yep.
So there goes Chig, Bigsby. And Chig coming off is kind of another one of these signal picks where I think you'll start to see this tight end 2 tier of guys all start to go pretty quickly here, Chuck.
Well, Chig went like 16 picks past
Right.
ADP. What's he at? Like 131 now? That's pretty.
Yeah. So, but we're going to probably see Dulcich, Higbee, Irv Smith. These guys are going to come off pretty quickly just by virtue of being at the top of ADP, but also anybody who needs a tight end still, those are the ones to take.
Yeah. I really wanted to take KJ Osborne. I was hoping he would be there. Maybe I should have taken him before Thielen. I mentioned I want more exposure to the Minnesota offense. This is
Do
gross.
we, I guess the one angle we haven't talked about at all yet, Chuck, as you kind of think about your pick here, do we want to think a little more heavily about these other Viking running backs? Dwayne McBride, the rookie they just added through the draft. We have Ty Chandler and Kene Nwangwu, all options for Minnesota. Now, without Dalvin Cook in the picture, they should at least be a little more interesting late in drafts, right?
Yeah, I think so. I looked into these guys. Let me double check who's who. So we got Dwayne McBride. He was a 7th round pick this year, and then Ty Chandler was a 5th round pick last year. And so just based on the draft capital alone, it's hard to want to be interested in these guys. They went so late. But Ty Chandler, was it Ty Chandler or was it Dwayne? One of these guys led NCAA in rushing yards. Dwayne McBride. Yeah, he led the whole NCAA in rushing yards. I didn't look into what conference he played in. I'm sure it wasn't very strong, but it's something to consider. Like he is a football player, good football player.
Sums up most of the analysis that we bring you all on this show. That player right there, he plays football. I love it, Chuck. And I just took Rashawn Johnson here in the 13th round at pick 154, a little after ADP. I was just pontificating about how I think he has a really good chance to win the running back competition there in Chicago. And not only that, he does correlate in week 17 with my shares of Bijan Robinson and Drake London.
I like it.
All right. That is the earliest I have personally seen Taekwon go. I don't hate it, but that was a little bit of a surprise for me.
It's one of the risers on the Best Ball Mania ADP tracker on OccupyFantasy.com. Yeah, this dude started at 186 7 days ago, and he just went 156. It's pretty significant.
A lot of good publicity for Mr. Thornton out of Patriots OTAs, and that has translated into a significantly higher draft position here. I do want to see what's okay. So Carr is gone. I probably should have been paying attention to that. This is a little bit of a reach, but I like this wide receiver a lot. Rashid Shaheed should have a really good chance to play well for the Saints and Derek Carr this year. Secondary option to Chris Olave. And I feel like I probably take like maybe one more wide receiver now on this roster the way I'm building it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like I think I should take Curtis Samuel because I have 7 receivers now, but this is not good. This is not a good group of receivers. So like Greg Dulcich would be a fine tight end pick. I already have Evan Ingram though. Same bye week too. It's not that big of a deal. I would take a third tight end anyway, but I'm just gonna take Curtis Samuel. I think he's a little bit undervalued. Probably take one more receiver after this. Yeah, I'm gonna take 2 more receivers, a tight end. No, 1 more receiver, 2 tight ends, and a quarterback with my last 4 picks. So we have a plan.
And I'm thinking about what I want to do. I've got options with some late stacks at quarterback to think about. If I do go the Baker Mayfield route, because I have Godwin and Evans, I should be interested in that. I'm going to need a third quarterback because I will have 2 quarterbacks with week 5 buys. I don't worry about the buys as much at running back and wide receiver, Chuck, because I feel like I should still have some options that can score points. But obviously, the tail positions here, quarterback and tight end, you have to be a little bit more sensitive to that.
Yeah, and I'm still making that mistake where I plan to have 2 QBs or 2 tight ends, and I draft ones with the same bye week, and it just now I have a decision to make in the last round.
So I would just, seems like it's somewhat superficial analysis, but definitely pay attention to that at those positions where we're just generally going light. And Chuck, we definitely don't think going more than 3 players at either of those positions makes any sense at all, right? I've seen a little bit of, I guess it's tongue in cheek, probably talk about 4 tight end builds, especially late, but that just feels like way too many roster spots tied up in bad players.
If the rest of your team is strong at all the positions, I don't mind 4 tight end. I'm not doing it that much. I'm cool with just taking 3 tight ends, even if it's the last 3 rounds. But I saw some sharp players talking about 4 tight ends. I saw one sharp player talking about 5 tight ends. Dan Zach, I've mentioned him on the show before, and that's a little too extreme for me. But it's like we went from 2 tight ends to 3 tight ends to 4 tight ends to 5. I don't know.
Yeah, you kind of cross into this territory of, well, I'm aiming for a unique build, but I'm unique, but am I just bad, right? Like that's definitely what you got to think about when you start doing crazy stuff like that.
Yes.
And now we see a run of New York Giant wide receivers. Giants beat media. I think Dan Duggan from The Athletic came out, reported after watching some of the OTAs they had recently, that he doesn't, as long as health doesn't interrupt this, he sees really no reason to think Darren Waller won't be the number 1 target in that offense. That's going to hold down the ADP of all these other Giant pass catchers. And I think you're just rolling the dice with any of them. There's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of cases to be made for, Wan'Dale Robinson in his high draft pick situation from a year ago. Hodgins had a pretty big role with that team at the end of last season, but if we're being honest with ourselves, we're just talking ourselves into players at that point because there's really no reason to expect either of any of these Giant wide receivers to be quote unquote the guy.
Right.
I'm not drafting any of them. I've noticed that pretty much every single time we get into the second half of these drafts, I'm not clicking on New York Giants players. So something I'm trying to be a little bit more sensitive to and maybe mix them in just for some high risk exposure. But that's a tough offense, I think, this year.
So I haven't been touching I guess I haven't been touching the receivers. I was taking Wan'Dale a lot before the draft, and I'm definitely in on Darren Waller now. But yeah, it's really hard to click on any of them. It's kind of like the Chiefs, like we have an idea of who's going to be at the top of the pecking order, but we really don't know. This is gross. I don't want to take Hunter Renfrow as my last receiver. So I don't want Hunter Renfrow as my last receiver. I feel like there's a better lottery ticket in here than Hunter Renfrow for this team. I need to take a risk. And I was going to take Brock Purdy either way, so I don't mind just locking him up right now.
Got to do some weird things late to make your rosters fit. And speaking of doing some weird things late, you had mentioned avoiding clicking on players you're heavily exposed to, and you had mentioned a wide receiver that was your highest exposure thus far. In best ball, there is a wide receiver who is my highest exposure, and I am going to take him on this team just because he correlates with my primary stack. It's very early for him, but I think at this point, I will be done with wide receivers, focus on quarterbacks, and maybe one more running back the rest of my draft. I'm going to lock in Mecole Hardman, who I think is the most underrated player in this range of drafts.
I like it. I've been drafting him a lot too. He's got like he actually correlates perfectly with my team too. I'm gonna take Conklin if he's there. Uh, like I guess the players I'm drafting a lot of McLaurin. I'm drafting a lot of Chubb and Amari Cooper, and then whatever random Miami guy. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of these end of draft Jets correlation guys.
And I think about a week or two ago, I had talked about how I hadn't really had any Cleveland Jets exposure, Chuck, and not just on this show. I think I've built a team similar to this like 3 times in the last
Mm-hmm.
week. So it's funny how these things go. But a lot of that comes down to what pick you draw when the draft starts. I
Mm-hmm.
did post a video on the Occupy Fantasy channel last week about how to mentally prepare yourself to draft from either the 1, 2, or 3 position. I can announce that tomorrow I'll be posting another video in that series talking about picks 4, 5, and 6. And obviously, we'll go through the entirety of the draft and have that done for you by the end of June. So a little bit of evergreen best ball content here for Underdog that we can use this summer as the draft season heats up, that we're trying to mix in amongst our stream schedule on the channel, just so the viewers are aware.
Yeah, I love it. The first one was a great video. It's really easy to. What I did was I opened it up and I just paused it on the screen when you had like your kind of ideal build for each pick, and just looking at that, I mean, it's pretty easy to build out rosters from those picks if you're looking at what Chris is doing. We got Nigel in the chat. Chuck can't wait for this draft to be over. I feel this is more of how the draft just falls in and out of your control. So embrace the variance. Yeah, embrace the variance. Like you're gonna have different builds. Like I did go two running backs early. Usually my receiver room is stronger when I go 2 running backs early, but today I couldn't do it. And Chris took my new favorite late round running back target, Kenneth Gainwell. I love his playoff schedule. DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny are 2 players who have constantly been injured over the last few years. And so that's not making me hesitant to draft Swift and Rashad Penny, but it makes me excited to draft a little bit of Kenneth Gainwell. If he's a starting running back in week 17 against Arizona, right? Week 17, it's just seems like a really, really good value.
And it correlates with a late round selection I had in Rondale Moore. So that's why I was interested in Gainwell. Was a player that I was playing pretty heavily in DFS last playoffs. And I think you had a lot of exposure to him as well. So near and dear to our hearts here at Occupy, Kenneth Gainwell. And I'm happy to have him on the squad for sure.
I was going to take Tyler Conklin. I can't believe someone reached for Tyler Conklin. I'll take Sam Laporta.
I guess just staying on this late running back spot a little bit will be the flagship show if we're talking about round 16, 17, 18 running backs. Chuck, another reason I'm into Gainwell on this spot, or even a Clyde Edwards-Helaire who's still on the board, is because I am not clicking on Fournette or Kareem Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are unsigned. Obviously, they can dismiss some of these players around here, but I just feel more comfortable investing into situations I can predict versus those that I can't. And maybe that's a mistake, Chuck, but that I kind of have a blind spot here for these free agents for that reason.
Same. Leonard Fournette is someone who before, if I needed a running back towards the end of drafts, I was comfortable taking him. But now I think there's enough options here of someone who can give us some, especially with a couple Minnesota guys added. I had some passing interest in Keontae Ingram too. So I think there's enough other options. We don't necessarily have to go there. But if they sign with the right team, their ADP is going to jump. But it's like, I don't know if it's worth the risk now.
It is almost mercifully over, Chuck. Don't worry. We're in round 17 at this point. I got a 1-5-8-2. Obviously, I have to do something about the quarterback position. I think I may angle for 2 of them to round out my draft, to be completely honest with you.
I don't hate it. I did make a mistake. I drafted 2 tight ends with a 9 bye week, but it's okay. I'm going to have a 3rd tight end. Hopefully he just catches a touchdown in week 9 and we're all good.
Shakir is an interesting player to me. I think he's only drafted in this range because of the offense that he is on, because he's playing the equivalent role to like wide receiver 4 on a good offense, which obviously a comparable player on a mid to I guess bad team would probably not even get selected. So Shakir is a player I have a hard time talking myself into, honestly.
Same. I saw someone on Twitter post they had like 40% of Shakir, and they did a lot of drafts, and I like based on what, I don't mind taking a
I
few
mean,
shots, but it's tough.
yeah. And Wilson here again, maybe something I need to get better at, but I am not taking Michael Wilson with the Cardinals. Hasn't been a player I've been clicking on at all, but obviously moves up the rankings in general with Hopkins out of the picture there. Hopkins visiting the Tennessee Titans, I believe today. That would be just a disgusting landing spot.
Yeah.
Not an offense that throws the football a ton anyway. Probably would end up being somewhat of like glorified tight end usage. That's a team I think is still going to run the damn ball, Chuck, and maybe they would look to Hopkins in the red zone. Isaiah Likely at tight end, really good pairing on teams where you have Lamar Jackson. I don't mind that for you here, especially if anything happens to Andrews.
That's the thing. It's like I need Likely to give me points in week 9 or just points period because Sam Laporta I'm not super confident in, and then Evan Engram hopefully he's there most weeks, but I'm not sure about this. I did take him for the Lamar Jackson pairing, but I think maybe it would have been better to take like Gesicki or Hunter
Mm-hmm.
Henry. I'm not
Hunter
sure.
Henry, an interesting, I think, last round pick at this point
Mm-hmm.
because one of the bigger stories out of Patriots camp was Gesicki was working more with the wide receivers, which
Mm-hmm.
obviously the what we're not being told there becomes somewhat obvious. That means Hunter Henry is working exclusively with the tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're both occupying different spots on the field with the ones, and they're both going to be out there, there should not be a tremendous difference in terms of at least fantasy football in selecting either one. One is being drafted, the other is not really being drafted. So it seems like
Mm-hmm.
an inefficiency there.
I agree. I
All
agree.
right.
Yeah, I don't think there should be that gap. Flip a coin, honestly.
Boy, I did not see myself sitting down this afternoon here on the East Coast and saying, you know what I'm fired up to do today? I am fired up to add Desmond Ritter and Baker Mayfield to a fantasy football team. But that is exactly what I did to close out this draft. And I've got 3 stacks working now. I've got Ritter with Drake London primarily, but obviously Bajan also on this roster. And Baker Mayfield, if he does win that Buccaneers job, with Evans and Godwin to close out my team.
I love it. We're gonna go with Tim Patrick here. I was considering Corey Davis because he has week 15, 16, and 17 correlation, which is pretty great. That's why I wanted Tyler Conklin, but I think I need help advancing. So, like Tim Patrick, if he provides any points to my team, we're happy with it.
Another draft in the portfolio, Chuck, and we move on to the next one. Sometimes that is just how they go. I do appreciate some of the positive feedback in the comments. I don't feel any type of way about this team, but I do feel like you talking about your Spike Week overlay, which has been on the stream here for everyone to see. We do have the Best Ball Mania Stack Seeker free page on OccupyFantasy.com. I did use that heavily to look at the week 15, 16, and 17 matchups for the players I was selecting on my roster here today. And I think it really informed my process quite well. I would highly recommend anyone that starts drafting best ball that hasn't already, that is watching our content, to really take advantage of that tool, because being able to visualize and see who these players are facing in those all important weeks is going to make a tremendous difference later in the process here.
And with the ADP tracker, like if you haven't drafted in a couple of days, things change in 2 days. I think they update the ADPs every 24 hours. Just take a quick look before you draft. Have it open during the draft. See if guys are coming up too high or if someone's falling, whatever. It's just a really good tool. Just quick look before you draft every time. One last thing I did want to talk about before we got out of here, like you can kind of see. So we talked about, I think Brian was talking about too. He's focusing, like we're focusing very heavily on the playoff correlation, and this is my week 17 correlation. And so 15 of my players out of the 18 drafted have a week 17 correlation, which is exactly what I want. And like only 400 something people are going to make it to week 17 out of 600,000 or whatever. And so it's a really small chance of getting to week 17. We still want to be aware of week 15 and 16, but it's just Like if I give all of my teams this week seven, this massive week 17 correlation, I have 5 games. Almost my entire roster is correlated. If one of my teams gets through, one of my 500 teams gets through to the finals, then I'm gonna be set up already. I don't have to worry about it. And so that's why we're trying to do that with every single team. Like it's all random anyway. But if we can give ourselves a few percent better chance, then I think that's great. And that's what we're trying to
That's
accomplish.
well said. It's all we can build towards because we don't have the ability to make any edits to these rosters. So we have to be more mindful to how we build them in this process. Chuck, it was a pleasure sharing the screen with you as always. I believe we will be back sometime this weekend with another live stream on the channel. That'll be announced in our Discord. And then I will have another strategy video up on the channel premiering tomorrow morning, talking about how to attack the draft from the 4th, 5th, and 6th pick positions. That's it for me. You can take us away, Chuck.
Yep. I appreciate everyone watching. Look out for Chris's video tomorrow, and we'll see you guys at the next draft. Thanks, everyone.